By far, one of my favorite things about going through a global pandemic, despite all of its challenges, has been just the cornucopia of incredibly hilarious memes and reels that have been birthed as a result. It's definitely a challenging time for our world, but some good opportunities to laugh about some of the impacts that has in different ways and stuff. There's this one reel in particular that I love, and there may be a few different versions of it, but it's where the person kind of goes through the COVID restrictions and highlights the ambiguity or kind of lack of clarity within the COVID rules. So you maybe seen it on YouTube or social media where they're like, whatever you do, don't leave your house. But if you do leave your house, make sure you wear a mask. Unless you're sitting at a table eating food or you need to drink a coffee or, all businesses must stay closed, except for the businesses that don't need to stay closed and must stay open. Those ones need to stay open. Or everybody needs to follow the rules, except for the political leaders who make the rules. These kinds of things, these ambiguities. And as much as that's kind of a funny thing to laugh about, it is hard to know how to function best and how to thrive when there's ambiguity and a lack of clarity. Now, I'm not saying making the rules and the restrictions is easy, and I'm not even saying I do a good job of it, but it is difficult when we are lacking clarity. And clarity is actually something I'm really passionate about. Years ago, my band was touring in Denmark, and in Denmark there are a lot of boarding schools, and boarding schools there don't carry the same kind of connotation they do here. It's a pretty common thing that students would go to these boarding schools, and we ended up playing at a few different boarding schools, and whenever we were there, we'd play a show, we'd hang out, and we'd end up oftentimes in the gym playing sports with some of the students. And they play they have different a focus on different sports than we do here. I felt like a total basketball star over there because they don't really touch it. Play a lot of soccer, and they also play a sport called handball quite a bit that we had never seen before. So we asked them to teach us. As they taught us, there's a little bit of a language barrier, not a ton, but it seemed a little unclear, but we kind of got the gist. So we started playing, and we play handball at a few different schools as we went around. But it always seemed like just right when one of us did something awesome or something went our way, one of the students would be like, oh, actually, there's a rule against that, or oh, you need to do it this way, or something would change. And it was, I don't know, I'll say frustrating at times. It's man, can we just get the clear rules? Can we just get this straight? Like I said, clarity is something I'm pretty passionate about. I think it sets us all up for success, to know where we're headed, especially as a collective, an organization, a community, a town. The more clarity we can have, I think the more we can achieve, the more we can accomplish. Now, I say that, and I'll be honest, having getting started here during a pandemic and through a lot of transition and all that, I don't think we've landed at a place where I'm hey, we've locked in all the clarity around everything in the organization. But one of my great goals as a leader here would be to figure out how we can do that better and better. Out of that, one of the things that I've been meeting with the elders, meeting with the staff, and thinking and praying a lot, that I believe is really helpful for any organization, is to have some strong language around the vision, mission, and direction of the church. We talk about joining God and restoring all things in our lives and our world here. And the question is well, what does that look like? What does that mean? Now, there's a lot that could be said, but one of my hopes, kind of in the vein of clarity, would be to have some simple language that kind of says, this is what we're all about. So maybe you knew that this is coming over these 2 weeks. We're doing a soft launch around what we're calling our new DNA statements. You might say, what's a DNA statement? A DNA statement is really saying, this is, at Town and Field Church, what we're inviting you into. We're saying, this is our DNA. This is the fabric of who we are. If you want to be part of Town and Field Church, if you really want to buy into the mission and the vision and be a part of our town and our community, if you want to buy in and really immerse yourself, this is what it's all about. These DNA statements hopefully give us a framework to evaluate what we're doing and to lead and to guide and continue thinking and focusing on our mission. And hopefully they give a lot of clarity as we say, as a community, this is where we're headed, so hop on board. This is an exciting thing. So I spent a lot of time, kind of asking myself, what is that? And ultimately, through a lot of time thinking about it, I started, the reality is that my previous church, I had come up with language that really embodies a lot of my philosophy of ministry, kind of who I am and the ways I want to lead a community. And I spent some time thinking, I created that at the previous place. Should I come up with something new? And spent a lot of time praying and thinking and talking to some different people, and ultimately realized that this is really language that I think that, maybe God's written in my heart around what I believe and what I hope to call and champion a local church towards. And so if you followed anything at my previous church at all, you'll maybe recognize some of this language, but the new DNA statements go like this. They're think big, think small, think in, and think out. These 4 simple statements: think big, think small, think in, think out. And to make it more memorable, you can check out, we've actually kind of visually represented it through the logo. You can take a look at this here. Think big, think small, think in, think out, by kind of highlighting different parts of the Town and Field Church logo. Now, these 4 think statements, I mean, they're not going to wrap up everything they do, but essentially, hopefully they start to create a clear picture saying this is really what we're about. We're about thinking big, thinking small, thinking in, thinking out. And what I want to do over these 2 weeks is just, like I said, kind of a soft launch, unpack them. In the fall, we're going to dig deeper into them, and we're going to continue to figure out as a community how we dive deeper into these things. And maybe you're like, who cares about DNA statements? I don't care about that or whatever. Regardless, if you want to carry these around as your mantra or your motto, maybe you're someone who really deeply cares about language. I think having common language in our community is really important and gives us a lot of clarity and opportunity to move forward in our mission. Regardless, this is going to frame the types of things we're about and the types of things we're not about. This is going to frame the direction we're headed, and this is going to frame the challenge that we're calling you into, the mission that we're inviting you into to be a part of us here. So this first week, I want to dive into think big and think small. Next week, we're going to talk about thinking in and thinking out. And each of these 2 pairs are kind of based on, the first 2 are based on a passage of Scripture in Acts, and the next 2 are based in a passage of Scripture in the book of Matthew. So make sure you come back next week and we can kind of finish unpacking them. For the first 2, think big and think small. They come from Acts 5:42. Now, most people, I think, if they were talking about Ryan Garrow, would say Ryan Garrow is not a very traditional person, and I would probably typically agree with that. In fact, if anything, you might find me leaning kind of against or away from what we call traditionalism. But I'd push back on that a little bit, because I think when we use the word traditional, or we talk about traditionalism, being traditional, we're actually talking about kind of a neo-traditionalism. A traditionalism that kind of dates back to like the Industrial Revolution, maybe a little further, but kind of this past century, like our modern history. And that's actually not very traditional at all. And you're right. If you say I'm not in that camp, you're very right. If you follow me on social media, you can go back and find my wedding photos where Talcy and I got married in jeans and t-shirts, and a lot of things about our wedding that were different. And we don't really care about just doing things the way they've always been done or the way that everyone does everything. And a lot of times you'll actually find me pushing against that and saying, you know what? Why are we doing things just because that's the way they're supposed to be done? Now, those things aren't big things or whatever, but I would actually consider myself to be a very traditional person in the context, and those aren't like selling words or, but in the context of what I'm hoping we go after as our DNA here at Town and Field Church. That is to say, Jesus came and he hung out on earth for a while, and he did all this cool stuff. He gave his life, and he started this thing called the church, and he kind of set up some people to run the church. And my question is always going to be, what did that really look like? What was the ethos of that? What was like at the core? What was the DNA of what that movement looked like? And here's where I'd say I'm going to be traditional. I want to get as close to that as we can. I realize we're in a really different cultural context, and some things are just going to be different. But I want to continue to say, are we capturing the heart of what that's about? If you don't know the story of the book of Acts, basically, this is right after Jesus. He had died, he came back to life, and then he takes off and he leaves earth. And he tells the people, hey, don't worry, I'm going to leave my Holy Spirit, my breath within you. I'm going to I'm going to send like this powerful manifestation of who I am. And out of that, you guys are going to experience some pretty cool things in the church. So we see that start in the book of Acts, and particularly in Acts chapter 2, and it continues. In Acts chapter 5, just giving you a little bit of context, what's happening in the narrative is the followers of Jesus, the church, some of these apostles, they're called, are boldly going around talking about Jesus and how amazing he is. But they have opponents, particularly the religious leaders of the day. And they actually, in Acts chapter 5, they arrest some of the apostles and they put them in jail. And I love this story because this angel comes in the middle of the night and gets them out of jail, which is just nuts if you think about that. You've been thrown in jail for your faith, and then an angel shows up and gets you out. But this is what I love. The angel doesn't like take them to like a safe place and whisk them away and take them home and be like, okay, hide out. Angel's like, this is how I'm picturing it going down. The angel's like, check this out. This this is going to be great. They threw you in jail to try to get you to stop preaching. I'm going to take you to where you were preaching, and you guys start so that in the morning, they're going to show up and they're going to see you preaching. It's going to be hilarious. So anyways, this is what happens. I don't know if that's how the conversation with the angel went. It's probably a lot more intense than that. They go back and they start preaching again. And the religious leaders come out and they see, they find out that these guys aren't in jail anymore, and they see them preach out there like, what are you guys doing? We locked you up for this. And like, you can't stop the mission of the gospel from spreading. So it goes through this big debate. What do we do about these guys? Should we imprison them to whatever? But they decide, okay, we're going to let them go and hopefully this thing will fizzle out. So it says that they beat them up and then they sent them on their way, and they're like, don't you dare preach about Jesus. And the text basically says the apostles are like, well, we're gonna. And they're like, no, don't you dare. It's like, we will, don't worry. After this great persecution, the church continues to grow. And at the end of Acts chapter 5, it says that they're rejoicing. I think Darren kind of touched on this at the end of service last week. Rejoicing that they could suffer for the sake of the gospel. They're all in on this thing. In Acts chapter 5:42, the result of all this cool stuff going on, all this growth, all this momentum, even the persecution, all this stuff going on, it describes their gathering as a church. And you see the same picture of this in Acts chapter 2. But Acts 5:42 says, day after day, in the temple courts and from house to house, they never stopped teaching and proclaiming the good news that Jesus is the Messiah. Day after day, in the temple courts and from house to house, they never stopped teaching and proclaiming the good news that Jesus is the Messiah. This church is on fire. Like, they are just like, we're going no matter what. You throw us in prison, you can beat us up, you can do anything, we are going. Day after day, they were constantly immersed in this mission of being this thing called the church, this collective of people that were all about the mission of the gospel, the mission of Jesus. And Acts 5:42 gives us this cool picture. They would gather regularly, they would meet, they would engage in faith community in the temple courts in a large group, and in house to house in kind of in smaller context. And that's where we get this idea of thinking big and thinking small from. And so first of all, thinking big, this is how we define it. We say we participate in mission together. Now, if you've been around the church for a while, you maybe hear the word mission and you think that means you got to like go to like some other country and like build a house or build a well. Or it's not that. This is what we're inviting you into here at Townfield Church, and this is what we're going to say we want to be true of all of us here at Town and Field, is that we don't just kind of like show up to Town and Field once in a while. We don't just like take in some of the programs. We don't just observe what's going on. We don't just like watch the video or do this thing. But we recognize that we are part of a larger picture. The church is this global organization that Jesus started that we get to be a part of. We're connected to people all around the planet. And within that, we've got this specific local faith community called Town and Field Church that we've decided this is what we're going to be part of. Jesus had put you kind of in this time and space, and you've arrived at Town and Field Church. In my mind, this is like this divine thing that you are here, you're part of Town and Field Church. And so what does that mean? In my mind, that means that we participate in mission together. We're not just showing up, we're not consuming, but we wake up with the knowledge that we are part of a bigger picture. We're part of a family, we're part of a team. The Bible describes the church as like a human body where every body part needs each other. Every body part is like dependent on one another. And in this body, if we want to be healthy, if we want to be active in this mission, remember Jesus, he gave his followers a mission. He said, go and change the world with the gospel. It's the most life-changing thing. This is what you're all about. If we want to be effective in this mission, the body needs to be healthy. All the parts of the body need to be functioning together. When we talk about engaging in mission together, that's what we're saying is being part of Town and Field Church doesn't mean you just kind of show up once in a while. It means that you actually say, I am part of this community that is on mission together. It's easy for us to ascribe a lot of like identity markers to ourselves. You know, it's just like, oh, I'm Ryan and I work this job and I have this family. Being part of the mission of Jesus really means taking on a new identity. That's waking up every day and saying, my name is Ryan and I'm a follower of Jesus. And what followers of Jesus do is they think big. They realize that they are part of a family of followers of Jesus, that they're part of a team, that they're part of this body, like the scripture paints this picture. But so often it's easy for us to think, well, I can just be the lazy eye or the foot that's fallen asleep or whatever. And not only do you limit your ability to experience God's goodness when you do that, but you actually cost the whole team. You'll know what I mean if you've ever had like an injury on a particular part of your body. It's not just like that part of your body is injured, but the whole body suffers. Darren, our youth pastor, his wife Lynn, right now has this thing called a frozen shoulder. I'd never heard of it before, but she's telling me about it, and I didn't realize how serious it was until I saw her, and it's like crippling. Like, she's got this sore shoulder, and what happens when she's got this frozen shoulder is tons of pain. She can't move it. It's messed up. Like, spending time trying to get it figured out and all that. But it's not just like, okay, I just can't do things that involve my one shoulder. It affects everything that she does. She needs help doing other things. It affects the way that other parts of her body function. It affects what she can or can't do. It affects the choices that she makes in life. Her whole body suffers because of this one part of her body that's suffering. Maybe you're new to church, and you get a bit of a pass here, and you can check this out for a while. But over time, I want you to know that this is what we're inviting you to. But maybe you've been part of church for a while, and you found it easy to take a pretty consumeristic seat. Maybe you just watch, and you're happy that other people are serving and making the thing happen. Maybe you're happy for your kids to just be able to, go to this program. You kind of get free childcare from the church, but you don't have to do much. And listen, Jesus doesn't need you in the sense of it's all going to fall apart if you don't do this. But when you recognize that all of us are participating in this mission together, you realize that when one person slacks off, or when some people decide, I'm just going to be a consumer instead of a contributor, I'm just going to be passive and observe rather than actively participating in this mission, you realize that the whole mission takes a hit. Being part of the church is an incredible opportunity for each and every single one of us to exercise and be what God created us to be. He invites us to participate in His kingdom, to participate in His mission of the church, and to be a part of that. That means showing up regularly. That means being a committed part of gathering with other followers of Jesus. That means being part of a community that does that. That means giving of yourself. Jesus came and gave His whole life to us. And He invites us into that life, and He has given us everything we are. And He says, now use what I've given you to serve the mission that I started. Whoever you are watching this message, you have some unique set of gifts that God has given you. And you can chill out and let those just get wasted, or else you can recognize that you play a pivotal role in Town and Field Church and being a part of this. Talk about the followers of Jesus meeting in the temple courts. Certainly it wasn't this picture of them just coming and watching a service and leaving and doing nothing. It was this thing of this community coming together and gathering, which sounds so great. And we don't have a temple court here. I mean, maybe our parking lot's kind of the closest thing, and we're not quite at the place where we can start gathering like that yet, which, let me just pause and digress for a second. I can't wait to do some in-person stuff. I feel for you people at Town and Field who've been here for a while, and you guys really miss seeing each other because you've got a lot of history with each other. I'm kind of on the other end of the spectrum where I think of the really deep philosophical lyrics of Carly Rae Jepsen in her really deeply inspired song, Call Me Maybe, where she says, before you came into my life, I missed you so bad. I missed you so bad. I missed you so bad. I can't wait to hang out with you guys in that way. I can't wait to gather with you guys. It's going to be so exciting. But regardless of what we can or can't do because of pandemics or other reasons, listen, Jesus started this mission, and the mission doesn't pause. There isn't space for us to just check out and just be okay, well, hopefully kind of church just keeps going. No, church doesn't keep going unless all of us keep going and all of us keep participating in this mission together. That's why in a couple weeks we're launching a serve campaign called We Can Do More Together. And we're going to invite you guys to say, I'm in. I'm going to use the gifts that God has given me to participate in mission. I'm going to serve. I'm going to give of myself. I'm going to be a part of this mission. I'm going to play the part that I uniquely have been wired and designed to play, that Jesus has called me to. We're going to be calling all of you and saying, are you in? It would really help us if you'd go to townfield.ca/serve and sign up in advance, so it would save us some phone calls. We want to invite you into this. This is an exciting mission. So talk about thinking big. Talk about participating in a mission together. That means showing up. That means being committed to this community of faith. That means giving what God has given you, of your resources, of your time, of your energy, of the abilities that God's given you to serve this mission. Day after day, they never stop proclaiming the good news that Jesus is the Messiah. And we talk about thinking small, and we say we engage in authentic community. This idea of meeting house to house. They met in the temple courts. They met house to house, never stopped proclaiming the good news that Jesus is the Messiah. This idea of engaging in authentic community, I think maybe one of the areas that I feel like as a modern church we've kind of digressed a little ways away from kind of the practice of the early church is that we've kind of set the wrong goals and what it means to have kind of like authentic and engaged community. You see, the mission, the reason they met house to house was all about what Jesus has done, about the good news of Jesus. And that was all about spiritual growth. That was all about growing in your faith. That was all about following Jesus. That was all about growing deeper in the gospel. That was all about this idea of joining God in restoring all things. And I think a lot of times we've often replaced that and we've made the central aim, let's make people feel really welcome and comfortable and safe. Now, should people feel welcome and comfortable and safe? Well, for sure. But I think those should be natural outworkings of what it means to actually engage one another in an intentional way that leads to this thing we call discipleship. And that means to grow in the ways that we follow Jesus. There's this passage in Galatians 6 that I really love. And in my mind, this really sums up a lot of what I hope we go after here in this idea of engaging in authentic community. Galatians 6, 1 and 2. Paul writes and he says this, "Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted." So Paul's saying, there are people around you who are going to be struggling with sin. They're going to be struggling with their own apathy. They're going to be struggling and saying, well, I'm not really doing that great job of following Jesus right now. I haven't been engaging with Scripture. I haven't been praying. I've been struggling with different sinful desires. I've been kind of losing my focus on Jesus. That's going to happen. And that seems normal. And so what's Paul saying? He's not saying, well, get rid of them or kick them out. They should feel safe and welcome. But that safeness and that welcome should be because people care about them and love them enough to say, well, hey, how can we restore you gently? And I love what he says there. He says, but watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. This is Paul recognizing, saying, you're going to struggle sometimes too. And what you need is people to step into your lane, into your world, and come and restore you. To say, hey, listen, you were made for something greater than this. You were made to follow Jesus. Let me help you. Let me restore you gently. Verse 2, I love this verse. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. This is big language. Paul doesn't always have like kind of this clause at the end of these sentences like, you're going to fulfill the law of Christ. That's a big deal, saying the law of Jesus is going to be fulfilled as you carry each other's burdens. And that's really true because this is very reflective of who Jesus is. Jesus came and carried all our burdens. Jesus came and took the burden of all our sin on himself, and he laid his life down on the cross. And he offered us grace and forgiveness. And then he invites us into that exact same mission. He's saying the work isn't done. Continue as the church to carry out this restorative work and carry one another's burdens. But that doesn't always happen that much. Again, I think we've maybe set our sights slightly on the wrong thing. We've made it a win if people just feel welcomed or happy or content or comfortable in the church. And actually, if you read Scripture, there isn't a lot about saying, well, following Jesus should just be this like happy-go-lucky, you just feel safe and comfortable all the time kind of thing. It's really about being challenged by the truth of the gospel, being convicted of your sin, and being pushed towards spiritual growth and development. Maybe comparing Christianity to a car dealership's weird, but imagine a car dealership when they're having a sale and they've got like the big wavy guy outside and they've got free popcorn inside. You pull over, you see the wavy guy, and you get a free bag of popcorn. If the salespeople are celebrating, like, yes, they came and they celebrated and adored our beautiful wavy guy flapping in the skin, flapping in the wind. And they came and ate our sweet, buttery popcorn, and they left with a smile on their face. The manager would say, that wasn't the point. Are those good parts of what it should look like to run that? And are those byproducts of running a successful business? For sure. In the same way that hospitality and welcome and love and kindness are byproducts of following Jesus. But the main mission, we need to keep the central and main, is the idea that the gospel changes us. Jesus came to change us. This idea of saying, if someone's stuck in a sin, restore them gently is saying this, is saying, it's okay to not be okay. Like, yeah, you should feel welcome here in the faith community, but it's not okay to stay that way. We're going to call that out of you. But what we've often done as the church is we've left the burden on the person who's struggling to like restore themselves. If someone's this idea of restoring someone, if someone's going to go restore a house, a builder doesn't show up to a broken house to restore it and set up a lawn chair in front of it and stare at it and say, okay, well, I'm just waiting for the house to make the first move. No, they go in. It's this active thing of going in and restoring the house, to carry each other's burdens, to restore one another, to help others grow is an active thing where we take the first step and we go after people and we love people and we encourage them and we challenge them. Our mission in life isn't to just be nice. It is to offer something very loving and deep and truly kind. And out of that, hospitality and welcome and safety. I mean, there should be no safer place on planet Earth. And when we flip it this way and we don't make it an active thing of restoring and challenging one another, then we put the onus on the person who's struggling to deal with it on their own. It's kind of like standing on the side of a ship and you see someone drowning and you say, okay, well, you take the first step. You start saving yourself and then, maybe I'll hop in. It's kind of, for me, the difference of like a lot of times in Christian community and community groups and stuff like that, we ask pretty soft-selling questions. How's your week been? How are you doing? Those are good questions, but basically we're saying, if you want to confess, if you want to start processing through your stuff, then you make the first move. Rather than us asking intentional questions like we've been practicing as a staff, how has your God time been? Where are you actually at spiritually? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your relationship with Jesus currently? If it's not great, saying, well, that's okay, but how can I challenge you and encourage you? Asking people, what are you actually struggling with? Are there things you're going through? Or actually maybe going up to people and calling them out and saying, hey, I've noticed this and I really think that Jesus has something more for you. This is really countercultural, and maybe talking about that makes you feel uncomfortable, but really I think this is at the heart of what we call discipleship, and we need to be more intentional about this if we want to truly engage in authentic community. This idea of thinking big and thinking small is really what it looks like to gather, to be part of a collective, to be part of this team. And we all play a pivotal role. No one's more important, no one's less important, no one's greater, no one's lesser. Staff, volunteers, attenders, we all play an important part in this mission. We're all part of a team. When I was in Lloydminster, I played on a ball hockey team, and we were the most mediocre team. I'd say it quite honestly. If there were 10 teams in a season, we would come in 5th. And some of the teams were terrible, and some of the teams were like all-stars. One of the issues on our team is that people regularly just didn't show up. So we were often like shorthanded. I remember this one night we were playing this team, and they were like the best team in the league. They had a couple WHL players on it, and the rest of us were just like dads with jobs, and But that night, only 5 of us and our goalie showed up. That meant the whole night, 5 of us had just run the whole night. We had timeouts that we could use, and we usually never use them, but that night we used all our timeouts. We'd be like, there'd be an icing call, and we'd be dragging ourselves down the rink. The ref would be like, hurry up, get over here. And we'd be like, you get over here, we'll just do the face-off here. If you want to think big with us, if you want to think small with us, and say this, we're part of a team. And we're counting on you. And I think you're counting on us. And this is actually an opportunity for you to experience who God has truly created you to be and partner with him in the mission of the church and to join with him in restoring all things. And my question for you is, are you willing to think big? Are you willing to think small? Are you willing to engage with us, to show up, to regularly be part of this, to take on the call to serve, to use your God-given gifts here at Town and Field Church, to engage in authentic community around like intentional discipleship and go deep with one another? This is a really exciting thing to be a part of. And I hope that you'll be a part of it, because this is who we are. This is part of our DNA here at Town and Field Church. We think big, we participate in mission together, and we think small. We engage in authentic community. And I'm so excited to be a part of this with you guys. Thanks so much, and I hope you have an awesome week.